Hey, my name is Don Paras, and this is the Crash Course of Canadian History. Today, we'll be examining the historical significance of the best-known era known to Canada, known as the Roaring Twenties. The 1920s gave us many things, such as jazz, movies, illegal liquor, sports, lots of prejudice against non-Canadians, commonwealth to other people, human rights for women, and eventually the greatest economic depression ever known to Canada. The war was finally over. 1918, finished. It was until 1920 is when Canada has finally joined the League of Nations before it disbanded. The political structure that happened during that era had the Prime Minister named Arthur Meighen, who took office, but he was unseated by Mackenzie King, a Liberal, who governed Canada for most of the 1920s. Mr. P, what is the overall significance and benefits of the 1920s? Well, I'll tell you, Jimmy. You see, the 1920s had so many benefits and significance that happened. Overall, the two main things that have influenced the significance and benefits of the 1920s was movement and innovations. After the war, the men came back, distraught, because they were left homeless or unemployed. The women took over the men's absence during the time of their war. They had to work for them to support the economy of Canada. It wasn't until they came back is when the government started discriminating them for their actions, for them contributing to Canada. It wasn't happy for anyone during the beginning of 1920. Without further ado, let's begin by examining the innovations and inventions that happened in the 1920s. Examine this picture. What have you noticed about this picture? As you can see, there's a woman washing her clothes with these big pots, with other pots following behind her. Now, as an historian, which event do you consider the most significant and why? Essentially, through this picture, you may just find it as an ordinary picture of a woman living in poverty. However, this poverty reflects foreshadowing of newer inventions that would help accommodate the lifestyles of the Canadian life. Another invention that was also proven to be helpful during the 1920s were automobiles, often referred as Model T. Some of the most infamous automobiles that were present during their time were Ford Model T, LaSalle, and Chrysler. These automobiles were present even before the 1920s. However, they were really proven most very effective and most used during the 1920s. They serve a very significant act of transporting people from destination to destination and influence movement. In addition, Canada has now introduced the first radio station in 1922. These radio stations had now set the foundation to make jazz possible. Jazz was one of the pop culture that influenced the set of rebellion to go against set of standards. As you can see, jazz have influenced this trend of dance named the Charleston. So, why might the Canadians have found the Charleston shocking? Essentially, this dance would be as equivalent to as the twerk, which is simply trying to say that women are rebelling this idea that they should follow this set of standards. The 1920s believed that the woman should be delicate, elegant, and pure. But this dance is the opposite. However, if you extract the meaning out of it, they're trying to prove the idea that they don't want to be this and they don't want to be that. They want to be themselves. It was not just jazz. There was also movies. One of the most famous movie that was released in 1920 was one of the movie named The Hunchback of the Notre Dame. This movie was released in 1923, and it was one of the most famous movies that have influenced another pop culture. These innovations and inventions have actually shaped the modern day technology and communications. Speaking of innovations, did you know that radios played a very significant role of influencing sports throughout the countries of Canada? Moreover, there was also golf. Examine these pictures and analyze their historical significance. During the 1919, in Canada, there was about 100 golf courses. By 1925, the golf courses have increased to 292. Golf was a sport that men and women of wealth or privilege could play together. However, back then, before women even became to play, there was a no woman policy. This reveals that Canada has now opened its gateways to golf towards the other people of Canada that were not considered as rich or men. In terms of sports, sports was one of the most famous entertainment that was beloved by Canada. People back in 1920 would often listen to Foster Hewitt, one of the spokesmen who spoke about the athletes on the radio. Moreover, Canada had participated in the Olympics in 1920. In the Olympics, Canada in the 1920 have won 4 golds, 2 silvers, and 1 bronze medal. One of the most famous male athletes back in the 1920 was Lionel Conacher, often known as the Big Train. He is known for his power, stamina, and speed. He's an inspirational athlete. He's also one of the members of the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. In addition, Conacher also became the Ontario MPP and then the federal MP. He began his career as a boxer, but over time, his athletic skills have led him to many sports to play in and in many teams. He was really well known for his achievements of being a famous athlete back in his day. Also, Canada has now recognized that Bobby Rosenfeld was one of the most famous female athletes back in 1920. She was born in Russia, and over time, she got to participate in the 1928 Olympic Games. She shocked Canada, for she had made Canada won gold and silver medals. Simply put, all of the sports that happened in 1920 played a significant role of entertainment. This form of entertainment have made Canada believe that they have hope. The sports they had in Canada also have made them believe that they are one united nation. However, throughout the 1920s, there was also the hard times. After the war, Canadian veterans came back and realized that the women have took their place. The cost of living did not adapt to the people's wages. So an organization named the OBU have been created before the 1920s. This organization have created strikes, most significantly the 1919 Winnipeg General Strike. Many workers have left their jobs to join riots, which caused chaos and violence. The organization soon disbanded. However, coming into the 1920s, Winnipeg have suffered a horrible reputation which infected its trades. Many other workers throughout the 1920s suffered wage cuts, such as the General Motors, fishers, and coal miners. People who faced the strike dealt with many depressions of money and social problems, whereas the prejudice have also risen throughout the 1920s. Immigrants who came to Canada also faced prejudice, such as the European nation and the Chinese. Most of the Russian immigrants had to be deported without trial by the government because the people of Canada have held petitions to get them out of here. Whereas for the Chinese immigrant, they had to face Chinese Head Tax Act, meaning they had to pay a bit more of an extra tax than other Canadians when having to come here to Canada. Moreover, the First Nations of Canada have also faced hardship with the Canadian policy. You see, they had to undergo through residential schools. In addition, the Black Canadians that were in Canada have also faced prejudice among the KKK, otherwise known the Ku Klux Klan. This organization have a very prejudiced ideology. They only search for racial purity, a case of which the Ku Klux Klan have shown their prejudiced action was the Johnson case. 2 couples who were believed to be in an interracial relationship have been accused and were brought up to the Ku Klux Klan. They taunted them, and so have placed burning crosses among their yard. Unfortunately, the woman left, and apparently the man was not black, he was Cherokee. This historical significance about the prejudice that were present in the 1920s have made Canada apologize their mistakes towards these people who were considered non-Canadians. I'd also like to add that Prohibition was also another historical significance that happened in the 1920s. You see, people back then have believed that alcohol or liquor were their main source of their social problem. Many Canadians, especially the veterans, were opposed to this new policy. And so, the rates of smuggling of liquor throughout the United States and Canada have made the government realize that there is no use for this law. We should not forget one of the most infamous historical figure of the 1920s was Nellie McClung. She is a woman activist who advocated for women's rights after being challenged by one of the prime minister. The Supreme Court in the 1928 have recognized that women were not considered as a person. She received an informal education system. Moreover, she have also have gained her teaching certificate when she was 16. With her communication skills, and under her mother's influence, she have advocated the reasons for why women should play a role in political life, as well as also playing in major roles that not all women could participate in, such as being a lawyer or a doctor. And so, the Supreme Court of Canada has now extended the term of a person towards women. Without Nellie McClung, she would make it impossible for women to initiate their advocacy of their rights of being a woman. And now, Nellie McClung have made it possible for women to participate in stereotypical men-role jobs such as a doctor or a lawyer. With the innovations, inventions, and historical events that have happened throughout the 1920s, one should conclude whether or not the 1920s have roared or not. The vast majority believes that the 1920s have roared because it was a break towards the Great Depression that will happen later, and it was a break throughout the Depression that happened earlier before the 1920s. Simply put, the 1920s have morphed the sense of technology of the modern times.